Um, this is coping with stress. It's not a matter of life and death. The little picture says it's more serious than that. Hold on, letting someone else come in. Um, and the causes, what? Okay. Causes of stress can be physical, like loss of sleep. I was taught in medical school that surgery or burn or infections can raise the vitamin C level requirement from 50 milligrams a day to 2,000, which is why all of a sudden some countries are doing good with vitamin C, and this country that thinks they got drugs is better than unproven methods are doing poorly, basically. Um, Chemical causes of stress, like prescription drugs, even over-the-counter drugs, are really a stress on the body. I have hold on, I will read it. Just a minute. I got to get the quote. I'm back, and this is when I was teaching at the School of Health. Dr. Harding came to me. He's the dean, but he had been the chairman of the pharmacology department. And when he heard I was going to be doing programs for the public, he wanted to share this statement with me. It's from a textbook of pharmacology, Drill's textbook of pharmacology and medicine, chapter 5. And I'm just going to read a small paragraph that says that drug action always represents artificial interference with the natural functioning of the organism. Well, if the body's designed for self-healing and you artificially interfere with that, the drug means you're not going to get well. It says by every drug by definition is a poison. Pharmacology and toxicology are one, and the art of medicine is to use these poisons beneficially. Well, for symptoms, but not for cure, basically, is what they're. So causes of stress can include chemical or drug stresses, mental stresses like anger, fear, greed. We'll look at some of these later. Spiritual stresses like lack of faith, sin, guilt can be factors also. And the effects on the body when you are stressed can include increased hormone production, adrenaline, what they call the fight or flight reaction. Blood clotting is more likely under that situation. The digestion is turned off. You have no appetite. You can get diarrhea or gastritis, ulcers even, from too much acid in the stomach. Loss of sleep, headaches. These are all, even anxiety. I was on a flight one time on an airplane, American Airlines, and they asked any doctor on board. So I went forward, and there was a young kid who couldn't breathe. And I listened to it. I put my ear up to his chest, and it sounded all right to me. Couldn't hear any fluid. I said, I thought for a moment, said, drinking any Cokes? He said, yeah, they're free. I'm drinking a lot of them. And the caffeine overdrived his nerve to hyperventilate. So he was hyperventilating. And so some people that are, you hear about hyperventilation syndrome, it feels the chest muscles tighten up to try to slow up your breathing, but people interpret that as can't breathe, and so they fight it, and it gets worse, but they need to breathe in a brown bag. Just rebreathe their carbon dioxide. It will help the shift the blood from alkaline to acid. A little more acid in the system will help relax those muscles. Anyway, the effects of stress: can't concentrate. Now here's how to neutralize it. 2 groups of rats were stressed with lights, loud noises, electric shocks. Group A walked on a treadmill, and they were kind of forced to do it. They just had to stay on that treadmill and keep moving. But Group B took little or no exercise, and in the end of 2 weeks' time, Group B were all dead, but the ones that exercised were all alive. So that shows that we can burn off the bad effects of stress to some extent, at least from physical exercise, which is a powerful lesson for us. If while you're camping you hear a noise and you think it's a chipmunk, there's no problem. But if you think it's a bear, it's fight or flight. And some people sit across from a bear every morning. So it's a difficult situation for those people. They can't run, they stew in their own juices. Their hormones, chronic stress brings chronic disease, basically. So the effects of stress on the mind, don't you love that picture there? It's initial excitement and long-term depression, desire for a prescription maybe. I've had people come wishing for something for their nerves. When I ask them, how much coffee do you drink? Well, they drink quite a bit. Trouble sleeping and a desire for a prescription sometimes, or loss of appetite and weight loss. These are all effects of stress. If we Sometimes people think they're depressed. Well, unless you have several of these, like trouble sleeping, loss of appetite, they're really not depressed. It's just an acute situation that will pass. We overuse that word depressed. It used to be that depressed included all of those: weight loss, loss of appetite, trouble sleeping, but now, and lack of energy to do something. And the antidepressants for kids are not a good thing, with the drugs making more likely the idea of suicide and really death from suicide from the teenagers that are taking Ritalin or Prozac. So, and mind control, if you're distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing, but to your estimate of it. In other words, kind of like if you think it's a chipmunk or if you think it's a bear, it's totally different in your mind. And so we can revoke this. We can tell ourselves, I was, well, I'll get to that later. I'll give another example. Anger, free-floating hostility, worry, fear, and guilt. There are mental mechanisms for each of these, but we need to know what those mental mechanisms are if we're experiencing them. And I'll give my own example here, but it comes from How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by Dale Carnegie. I analyzed the problem fearlessly to determine the worst that could happen. And he did this with a man named Carrier, who invented the air conditioning units. And he installed a unit in Missouri, and it didn't work. And for 2 weeks, he was kind of in a daze, walking around, not knowing what to do. And then he decided, well, worst thing that can happen is I'm going to lose my job, but I can get another one. I got the credentials to get another job. So when he was no longer worried and anxious, he was able to think of a solution that could work, and turned out that it did. And so they had to, modify it. It cost a few thousand, but it wasn't the end of the world. For me, it was, I was taking calculus in college, and I didn't understand it, went to the help sessions every night. I copied the problems down. So I could see as they were explained, but every problem seemed different. And I knew when the test came, I was going to be in trouble. And as I walked home one night, I just thought, well, God guides the stars. Maybe I'm not cut out to be a doctor, pre-med. And I'm not going to worry about it. Just do the best I can, and cross the bridges when they come. And as it turned out, lots of people dropped out. We had over 40 people drop out of that class, but at the end of the year, I survived it with a C minus. So glad and thankful for that, basically. And God is good. Reconcile yourself to accept the worst if it occurs, and gather facts. Ask others what they perceive as the problem. These are things that can be done if we're worried and have problems that way. So anyway, work on the underlying cause is a good solution to it. Okay, it's better to believe than to disbelieve. This is Einstein, who said, if in so doing you bring everything into the realm of possibility. And I like another statement that he made, that God is not a magician, he's a scientist. So it all fits together pretty good. Here's a story about the pineapple story. Has anybody on the line heard the pineapple story?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Well, I'll tell it briefly. Is that you, Christine?
Yes.
Okay, good. I thought I recognized your voice. Christine's heard it, but Pineapple Story is a true story of a missionary who was in the Southeast, and he longed for fresh fruit from which they didn't get from the States very often. So he paid the natives to plant a pineapple garden for him. But when the pineapples came ripe, he didn't get any because the natives stole them. Their motto was if their hands plant them, their mouth eats them. So they would come through the garden where they had planted and pick them out, and he didn't get any ripe pineapples. And the book is a picture book, beautifully illustrated by Bill Gothard in a Institute of Basic Life Principles. Um, Tells different strategies. The missionary got a German Shepherd dog. Well, it frightened the natives back into the jungle, so he had no ministry. And his wife refused to give when the pineapples were stolen. She refused to have clinic and give them medicine. Well, again, they went to the back into the jungle. No ministry. So on a trip to the United States in a basic life principle seminar, he learned he should give everything he had to God. And so he decided, well, I'm going to give the pineapple garden to God. I'm not eating any pineapples from them anyway. So he did that. And when he went back, he no longer got angry or upset. And one day, one of the natives said, you no longer get upset when we steal your pineapples. He said, well, they're not my pineapples anymore. The native said, oh, whose are they? He said, they're God's. I gave it back to him. Oh, you shouldn't have done that. Get it back from him. And then they got together, they huddled and said, well, maybe God is angry with us because we're not getting fish when we go fishing. Our wives aren't giving birth. They decided they better not steal God's pineapples. And so basically they urged him to take the pineapples, and he did, but he also gave them some. He was happy to share. He just wanted some. He didn't want them all. And so nice outcome. We should recognize that anger, if we're angry, is a sign that we have not surrendered something to God. We need to surrender to God. So that's a profound insight from anger, basically. Well, and that's the story. Guilt. We know that too. Is a responsibility for some wrong that we've done, to acknowledge we've guilt, and to willingness to make amends to someone. What does it take to make it right? That's biblical restitution that includes others and to God. Bill Gothard, this fellow that gives these institutes, he shows that our responsibility as Christians is in either case, whether someone has wronged us. In Matthew 18, we should go to them first by ourselves, and then if they don't hear us, take one or two others. Or if we think someone has something against us, in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, if your brother has aught against you, go to him. So either way, if you have something against them or if they have something against you, we are the communicative agent. We have a responsibility, like Christ, to try to iron it out. He's the Word, and God did that. Christ was the communicative agent to reconcile us to God. Beautiful concepts, really, as we consider that. And so self-control versus powerlessness. When we really lose control over something, it can be excessive eating, it can be overwork, it can be spending. There are some people that in sports, that was an idol for me when I was a teenager. But I'm glad that it disappeared when I took medicine. I had to study, and there was no time for sports. Sex can be a factor, or music, alcohol, drugs, pornography, perversions, gossip, TV, entertainment, gambling, and games. All of this are reasons where people become powerless. And if we give it to God, it's kind of like the top one on the right list is alcohol. They have an Alcoholics Anonymous at 12 steps. We recognize that we have a problem and that we've become powerless, and we turn our lives over to God as we understand Him. And they have the 12 steps that give victory in the life, to share with others the insights and so on. So that's basically something we can do. Whether there's an Overeaters Anonymous and so on that can fit this. Anonymous help. We admitted, I have some of the text from the 12 steps, that our lives become unmanageable, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, made a decision to turn our lives over to God as we understood Him, and made a searching, fearless moral inventory of ourselves. This is steps to Christ principles, really. Justification by faith is the way we can be made right with God and be grateful to Him. Hans Selye said, gratitude is the most healing of all emotions. That's what we should feel toward God for his provision for us. We look for something to thank God every day. Let our gratitude show to others. Expression deepens the impression if we express it, basically. And misuse of time. We should ask ourselves, as Ellen White says, time is, we all have talents like money, certain abilities, but time is one that we will all be held similarly accounted for because we all have the same amount of time. And I have found that we should think often, what's the best use of my time? You know, if we are accountable to God, it shouldn't be just do our own thing. We should have a goal in life and try to focus on how we can further God's kingdom. What are the principles of his kingdom? And set some priorities, make short-term goals that are really in harmony with the long-term objectives, so that we can, on a yearly basis, be doing something. I did that in college. Each year is a different year, towards medicine. Well, I'm glad that I'm not in medicine anymore. And basically, having goals and working towards something is a great idea. And asking God's guidance in our time and choices and the decisions we make so that we can further his kingdom. Basically, that's what we want. Kingdom means dominion of a king. He has dominion in our lives through his spirit and so on. And I like this one here from Psalm 90, verse 12. It says, teach us to number our days that we can apply our hearts to wisdom. This implies, if you think about it, that we can know how much time we have, perhaps. I think there is a promise. By the way, this Psalm 90, verse 12, has a context in verse 4. It says, 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday that is gone. And so that is really the basis for Peter's statement in 2 Peter 3:8 when he said, beloved, be not ignorant. 1,000 years is like a day is like 1,000 years. God is not slack. The day of the Lord will come. The day of the Lord being the end time period. I'm seeing it as not Christ's second coming as sometimes misunderstood, because in Joel, which has more references to the day of the Lord, Joel 2, verse 10 and 11 has an initiating factor of an earthquake, and it says it's the day of the Lord, and then there's a crisis, and blow the trumpet, gather the people, sanctify the congregation, call a solemn assembly, fast, pray, seek God. And he says he would turn away the northern army and he would pour out his spirit. Your sons and your daughters will prophesy, old men dream dreams, and so on. Young men see vision. And there's all of those things are happening in a crisis situation, but no second coming in that chapter, or even that you can easily identify in the next chapter. So my point is, the day of the Lord is an end time period, and Paul uses the same phrase when he, and by the way, he also says, this is 1 Thessalonians 5:1, you have no need that I write, brethren, for you know perfectly. Now, I'm sorry. Backing up on this, this is a little discussion of end time timing, okay? The disciples, when walking up the mountain in Acts 1:6, said, are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel at this time? And his Christ's reply was, it's not for you to know the times and seasons. He was linking the kingdom and the setting up of it to a phrase found only two other places. Once in Daniel 2, verse 21, that God sets up, the times and seasons are for when God sets up a kingdom or takes them down. And so Christ rightly referred to that, is it's not for you to know. But Paul then, in the final third time, where it says, of the times and seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write, for you know perfectly that the day of the Lord, that's the end time period, comes as a thief in the night. When they're saying peace and safety, sudden destruction comes as travail on a woman with child. And I just want to introduce this phrase, all tying it together. The day of the Lord is when the kingdom comes. It's the times of it. It says, you know perfectly the times and seasons. It's the day of the Lord that comes as a thief in the night. And that day of the Lord comes with destruction or earthquake. We said that in Joel 2:10, the earthquake, day of the Lord. And I'm seeing that the the precedent for this is in Exodus 12 when God said, "I will execute judgment," and death fell on the Egyptians, and there was a midnight cry, just like in the wedding parable, a cry at midnight. Hello, Ellen White says it's a sudden, unlooked for calamity. Well, it was in Egypt. Calamity fell on Egypt, and it says in verse 42 of Exodus 12, it's the night of the Lord. Well, as sure as day follows night, the end time is going to be like that. There is going to be life and death issues with an earthquake initially. And when Ellen White was at Loma Linda and saw an earthquake, she saw buildings, great and small, falling to the ground, many lives blotted out. And she said it seemed that the forbearance of God was exhausted and that judgment day had come. Well, I believe that's judgment of the living. Just like she said tobacco is a malignant poison and it causes malignant tumors, I believe judgment day is judgment of the living. We're not there yet. We're getting there. I believe it is soon. And so I basically, and I'm tying this all into the phrase that 1,000 years is like a day and day is like 1,000 years. God is not slack. The day of the Lord will come. That's 2 Peter 3, 8 to 10. And when it says God is not slack, the Greek word braduno means no tarrying, no delay. Now, the bridegroom tarried, but this is saying now no tarrying, okay, after 6,000, I think, because God, if 1,000 years is like a day and God gives us 6 days to do all our work, after 6,000, it's up. And so I'm about to explain to you how I think time is up. and so things are impending and there's no slack. I don't think there, it looks to a lot of people like, when in the world is the Lord coming? Things are getting bad and no Sunday in sight, But I'm seeing that Sunday is the third angel's message. We got to give a first angel's message first. When Christ said in Revelation 10, verse 11, you must prophesy again means something that the pioneers did the first time. And they gave a message of time of judgment and bridegroom coming. And we got to give those messages with good timing. And God is not calling us to embarrassment this time. I believe I can explain how this is. And we'll look at that. This is turning out a little longer than I'm expecting. But anyway, I enjoy sharing. Let me just see what time it is if I can do that. I don't want to run past our time. Let's see here. Well, hold on.
I think it's 1:25 here.
Okay. Well, that's good then. We still got time. Okay. Thank you, Christine. So where were we? We were talking about 1,000 years like a day. And how would we know when that is? Is God going to shout it out of the sky to us? I don't think so. Ellen White has a classic statement with reference to Joseph Wolf, missionary to the Jewish people. And but when she uses certain things, she likes that idea or she wouldn't be putting it in her book. And Joseph Wolf said, no man knows the day or hour, but does that mean no man will ever know the days or hour? Did he not give us the prophecies of Daniel and the signs so we might know at least the approach of that time as when Noah went into the ark? So obviously we should know more than maybe we're knowing. And when he said the prophecies of Daniel, I want you to think about this, the best known time prophecy in all the Bible that even every Christian probably or should know is Daniel 9. 70 weeks are determined upon your people, and they point to the Messiah in the 69th week, the anointing, okay? Somehow the Jews sadly missed it. They weren't looking at their time prophecy, but they could have known, they should have known, and failed. But my point is that the 70 weeks, the 77s, as we know, are 490 years, but they are also 10 jubilees. A jubilee was the 50th year, but it came every 49 years because number 50 was also number 1 of the next sequence. It was 7 years, 7 years, 7 years. And when they came to 50, it was the first. That's why the 490 years were 10 jubilees. They had jubilee events at the beginning, They were given freedom to leave Persia, and they got their land back. That's what happened in a Jubilee year. In Leviticus 25, verse 9 and 10, every man is returned to his land and so on, you see, and liberty. And Artaxerxes gave them that freedom in 457, and Christ came to proclaim the acceptable year at the end of that. In other words, if they had received him as Messiah, it would have been Jubilee. It would have been wonderful. But they didn't receive him. And so, but the point is that the 490 years span 10 Jubilees. What if you go 50 Jubilees? The Jubilee of Jubilees, okay? Doing the math, 490 times 5, or let's do it from times 4, from 34 AD after 10, 40 more, because there's 10 behind you, make 50, and it comes to 1994 for a sabbatical year, and Jubilee was 95, a Jubilee year. In the Jubilee year, Pope John Paul went to the UN on the Day of Atonement, which was the day to proclaim Jubilee of all things. Amazing coincidence for him to be in the UN on the Day of Atonement in 1995. And I thought, wow, Christ is coming. I wrote a book, about Jubilee and so on. Well, it was dated and really didn't fit well. Things did not end with Y2K and some of that. But lo and behold, after a 20-year gap from Pope John Paul in 95, 2015, Pope Francis also went to the UN, also on the Day of Atonement. To me, it is just incredibly, question mark. Why 20-year gap after all the Jubilees, and both times on Day of Atonement? And then it hit me that, like the course that I did not like in college, calculus, when you integrate, you integrated things. If you integrate the Jubilees into 1,000 and you put 490 years and another 490 make 980, there are 20 years left over at the end of the Jubilees, marked by the papal visits. Can you see that, ladies?
No, all we see is the same screen of Psalms 90:12.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm just talking to you right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm writing it down. Yes.
Okay, but in talking here, I have Susan in my left ear with the phone, and she says, yeah, she can see it. And if you have 490 years for 10 Jubilees and 490 more make 980, and 980 has 20 years left over in the 1,000. So God is telling us, don't be ignorant about 1,000. He didn't say don't be ignorant about the Jubilees, which is what led me to think that the 6,000 was up. But now, after the 20 years, that completes the 1,000. And I believe in 2015, we are entering an end time zone where the end is coming. God is not slack now. And where are we? We wonder, well, that was 2015 when the Pope came to Congress, and when gay marriage was in the Supreme Court. The abomination was standing where it ought not in both of those cases, gay marriage being an abomination, and also the Pope representing the mother of abominations in standing in the in Congress. So where are we, since then? My point is, God declares the end from the beginning. He says that in Isaiah 46:10. And if we go to the book of beginnings, we find in the 41st chapter that Pharaoh has a couple dreams of fat cows and skinny cows, of fat heads of grain and skinny heads. And the meaning that Joseph interpreted was there's going to be 7 good years, and then there's going to be 7 bad years. And God is good not to spring the bad years on us straight off the bat, because we weren't ready in 2015. And we still aren't now, but I believe we can get ready, okay? Because since after 2015, the next year, President Trump was elected and the economy turned around. And, if this is about economy, we're having good years. The black people are having more employment and less unemployment than any time under Obama or historically. They've got jobs. So it's supposed to be good for the economy, even though right now we got a little problem with this coronavirus. I believe it will iron out soon because we got to get to the end of 7 years before the bad years come. Okay, if you follow what I'm saying. This is just a heads up wrinkle on the road, but it's not the end of the road right now. And so what I'm telling you is that and this is another way to look at it. If you consider 7 years from 2015, the sabbatical will end in 7022. And then I believe there will be another Jubilee event. Okay. And let me explain why. And it goes back, maybe, just like God is, it says, first of all, Christ is the Lion of Judah, and it says he's going to roar and the heavens and earth will shake. But it also says the devil is like a roaring lion, So maybe there's double imagery here, and I'm looking at a bad imagery for the Jubilee, starting back in 1973 with Roe v. Wade, when they approved a abortion, and we've had 60 million babies killed, slaughtered as a result of that. It's just, but that was a sabbatical year that meshes with everything else I've been saying. If you go every 7 years, bad things happened or signs of the end occurred since 1973, and we're coming up to the 50th. Well, the 49th year will be 2022, okay? And I believe 2023, 3 years from now, will be huge with a Jubilee event like Egypt, okay, when death fell on the Egyptians. And I believe it will be the earthquake that initiates the end times. When Ellen White says it seemed that Judgment Day had come. And she was at Loma Linda when she saw that. I believe Loma Linda will be included for its sad abominations because they've done abortions, and they hijacked the school to teach drugs, which she never wanted done. She said no twice to them, and when she didn't see them on the third visit, she wouldn't even talk with them. They reported to the committee that she didn't say no, and that's a bad disaster as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, and I took a medical education. I struggled to understand how these things are what God's plan was. Sadly, it took me a while I taught. I was a student leader of a medical evangelism group that tried to study God's plan, and I understood that drugs shouldn't be used. But how much better it would have been if they had kept it as she wanted and taught natural remedies. It would not be a medical school. It would be a naturopathic school, like in Battle Creek, when the brightest, best people in the world, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Luther Burbank, William Jennings Bryant, J.C. Penney, bright people came for drugless care to the Battle Creek Sand. We don't have that happening now. Why? Because we copied the world, and we're no better than the rest of them, and probably worse. So Loma Linda will get judgment, in my opinion. And right now they're in a huge building program with billions of dollars in debt, billions. And as I talk with one Bible teacher in the Bible department, he says, pray the Lord will come to end this because we're going to crash under the debt that we have. Well, they're going to crash before it, I think, in the earthquake that comes. But anyway, that's just kind of got sidetracked and derailed from this. But I was saying and expressing to you the devil's jubilee of bad signs or signs from God even also. If you start in 73 and you go 7 years, May 19, 1980 was a dark day on the anniversary of the dark day 200 years earlier. In Ellen White's great controversy, a dark day in New England. Cows came in, chickens came to roost. They had to use lamps to read anything at noontime. Well, Mount St. Helens erupted in the northwest this time, and winds carried the ash over 3 states in the northwest. The eruption was May 18, but it took a day for the ash to get there and make the day dark on the anniversary date of May 19, 1980, May 1780. It's all the same. And then 7 more years, the Pope lands in Miami. That's 1987. Kisses the ground in acclaim for Catholicism, and travels to Santa Fe, New Mexico, Los Angeles, Detroit. He went around our country like the Roman army went around Jerusalem. And there was a stock market crash of 500 points when the stock market was much smaller. That was huge. It was the biggest stock market crash in proportion to anything that's happened in over 30 years. And then add 7 more years from 1987 to 1994, 1 million Protestant Tutsis were slaughtered in Rwanda. Uh, there were so many UN vehicles on the streets of Kigali that they could have easily stopped it, but the UN did nothing. They just said, let the local, I think John Paul, the Pope, told them, let the local government handle it. Well, the local government was Catholic, so they got slaughtered. And some people will go to hell because of that, I'm sure. But I just, it was a sign, 1 million, if we think the UN is a good organization, it will do the Pope's bidding, because the Pope will be riding it. In the imagery of Revelation 17, the Pope is riding the beast, and it's the image beast. The UN is the image beast of the Catholic Church. Old World Order, New World Order. UN is New World Order, and the Pope will be in charge ultimately. They got so many Catholic nations in it. So not good. But add 7 more years to 1994, and you come to 2001, World Trade Center, huge event. That got us into the war with Iraq, and which in the Daniel 8th chapter, the Medes and Persians are now Iraq and Iran, and we broke one of the horns on the ram as a result of that 2001. Add 7 more years, 2008. The stock market crashed for 10 days. That recession that started then under, at that time. And then we had 7 more years to 2015, and the Pope comes to Congress, and gay marriage, again, big signs, and the Iran nuclear treaty, peace and safety, all that. So that was the sixth, counting from 1973, we've had 6 cycles of 7 years, and we are in the 7th one right now, leading up to 2022. And I believe that it will be big. I don't know what, but I believe that 2023 will be the Jubilee event that, like in Egypt, death fell on the Egyptians. And I believe the earthquake will be a huge event that will be big trouble for Southern California. So we've covered a lot of ground, and if you have questions, I'm glad to answer or try to. And if not, why, that's plenty to chew on. And but I believe it all comes out of this program. The slide on the screen says, teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. And to me, that's the best explanation of where we are and what's coming, I think. I think we can know based on recent history in this country and on God's principles. He says in Leviticus 25, verse 8, thou shalt number unto thee 7 Sabbaths of years. And I think that the going from 1973, 7 Sabbaths, we've seen 6 of them, and they haven't been good. And we are coming to 7.
And when the 7th one comes, then is there 7 more years?
Well, no, well, the signs that we've had on sabbatical years have not been good, but we've had overall, even right now in this current economy, has been better than anything. We're not. What I want to say that, yeah, we're not hurting, and if we think about it, we haven't seen famine yet. And the 7 good years occurred before the 7 years of famine. Nebuchadnezzar even ate grass in Daniel 4. And I believe Daniel will be unsealed, that even kings may eat grass. I don't know exactly. I do see that God has a plan, and we can talk about that another time. Don't want to get into that right now, but we can look forward to it tomorrow's Sabbath and Sunday's coming. and we can discuss that. But I would say we are not in the bad years yet, and but we're in the good time. Even though it's not good every which way, these signs have to occur. But it's been largely those signs have occurred in sabbatical years.
So tomorrow, you're going to continue with what?
Okay, I'm getting people talking in both ears right now. Tomorrow we will continue with a reference on Daniel, probably looking at Daniel more closely. We've introduced him and the 77s, but there's more to consider, and we'll do that tomorrow, and then maybe the wedding parables on Sunday to finish this out.
At the same time, at 1?
Yeah, if that's fine with you all.
Yes.
That works for me, yeah.
Okay. Well, love you all. God bless you. Thank you for your interest. And if you have problems and you want to email me and say, hey, I don't like this, feel free, and we can address them next time, whatever. I know that, let me just say this, that there are two statements that are often quoted. One is that we've already dealt with. The disciples wanted to know, will you restore the kingdom? And Christ's reply was, it is not for you to know. And Ellen White quotes that in Selected Messages, Book 1. But it was to a church leadership who had already done what the disciples had done. The disciples had failed Christ. They ran, and when they should have stayed with him. In my opinion, I'll just share this little insight. You see, James and John wanted to be on the right and the left of Christ in the kingdom. And they asked through their mother, could they be? And Christ said, well, that's not mine to give, but can you drink of the cup? And they said, yes, we can. Well, the last night he gave them the cup. And oops, a couple hours later, they were asleep. They could not drink of the cup. They lost it, okay? And so when they could have been, if they had been praying, I believe they could have been strengthened, and they just said, we'll go with you to the trial. And at the trial, when he was accused of tearing down the temple, they could have said, no, he's not going to tear the temple down. He's talking about his body. Come out Sunday morning. You'll see he's coming out of the grave. Well, if they had had the faith to be there and say that, there would have been witnesses. The Jews could not have lied. The whole nation might have had a Pentecost where they repented for what they'd done. And history would be different. The world would be more law observant, more scriptural. It could have been a huge victory today, but it is right now, God's side is losing the battle. And it's up to us to finish it right, in my opinion. And apparently it's losing, okay? Because, and right now, from my perspective, I'm seeing God's, let me just, we're going to deal this partly in the Daniel, so maybe I don't want to spill all the beans. Let's talk tomorrow. I'll just leave it at that we've got good stuff to share, but I was dealing with the fact that when Christ said it's not for you to know the times or seasons, Ellen White cites it, but it was for people in her day. Paul said in the context when he says Christ will come from heaven with a shout, the voice of the archangel, the trump of God, the dead in Christ shall rise first, and it's of the times and seasons. It's in that context, brethren, that you know perfectly the end time period will come. So if we're to know the times and seasons, but they weren't, I think we can know it. That's like Paul says. Okay. And secondly, the statement that you don't know the day or hour, which Ellen White quoted with Joseph Wolfe and Great Controversy. The word for know, eido, Greek word, means be aware, consider, understand. Christ was saying, you don't understand. He wasn't saying you can't know, won't know, never know. He was just saying you don't understand. And each time he said it, he gave an example from their law for a provision that fits 9/11, something big, and I'll explain it tomorrow or the next day, okay? 9/11, big. It's actually Numbers 9, verse 10, 11. That's the 9/11 is a different 9/11 than we're thinking, but God linked it to a big event. And when you say 9/11, everybody knows that is, that's something big. And so it's coming. And we'll talk about it tomorrow or the next day.